So we have some important movers and shakers, I believe, on the call this morning, which will help us get the rebuild done, as well as everyone who wants to generally help. And it's so exciting to feel the energy of building in our community. For sure, it's all of us working together that will create the quality of the rebuild. And so we can actualize something out of dust that's really amazing. I wanted to dedicate, and really I'll be dedicating all the calls to the spirit of helping our neighbors. I just so want to acknowledge all the people who reached out to help their neighbors during the fire. It was an incredible thing to endure. And then also to everyone who reached out afterwards to help. And now everyone who's showing up for the rebuild. It's just an incredible spirit that I feel like we have in the Valley, and I'm excited to see what we can manifest together. So we have a lot to do and learn through this process. And we're really honored to have amazing, experienced people like Charles Brooks to assist us on this. And he's been showing up a lot of our community meetings, and I know he has a lot to do with his rebuild in Paradise. So thank you so much, Charles, for that. I founded this Zoom series and Rogue Valley Housing Solutions. My name is Karen Logan, and we're so fortunate to have two talented recent Southern Oregon University grads, Michaela and Caden, and they're doing a lot of work behind the scenes. So thank you very much for that. And now I will turn it over to our wonderful and dedicated Ellie Holte, who will be our host.
Hello, thank you, Karen. Yes, my name is Ellie Holte. I work with the local innovation lab, and that is an experiential learning internship program that's in partnership with SOU, where students learn leadership skills in the classroom that they can then apply to projects out in the community. And as Karen mentioned, we have two graduates from our program on the call. The first, I'll introduce Caden Jones.
Hi everyone, my name's Caden Jones and I'm a recent SU graduate. I majored in environmental science and policy, and I was an intern with Ellie at Local Innovation Lab, and I'm just happy to be here with you all. Thanks. And Michaela, go ahead.
Hi all, I'm Michaela Hoyt, and I just graduated with a major in environmental science and policy and minor in criminal justice. And I also had the opportunity to intern with Ellie for the Local Innovation Lab, and now get to work with Karen and Caden and Ellie, and it's been an amazing process, and I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. A few notes before we introduce Charles Brooks. So if we have your email address, and so if you're registered, we do have your email address, and if you didn't register, maybe we don't. So you can add that to the chat to make sure that you can receive the notes that we'll be taking on the call, a link to a recording of this call, a link to register for our future events, and we'll also be sending out supporting documents that relate to the topic today. And please feel free to share those and forward those along to anybody you think might be interested. And also, as we mentioned, if you'd like to share with us your vision of how you'd like to participate in the rebuild, please do that in the chat as well. And we're going to be forming different kind of action groups. And if there isn't a group that we're forming, then it's possible we could direct you to a group where you could participate as well. So that's it for the notes. Today's call is about uniting the community to rebuild, which is a subject very near and dear to me. Charles Brooks is a dynamic leader in all aspects of the rebuild of Paradise after the Camp Fire of 2018. That fire destroyed, I didn't know this, over 18,700 structures. He founded the Rebuild Paradise Foundation, which is a grassroots organization of campfire survivors and community leaders from the public and private sectors. And they're dedicated to serving the long-term needs of Butte County's disaster-affected residents, businesses, and workforce. Special bonus fact, Rebuild Paradise was voted the California Nonprofit of the Year in 2020 for their state assembly district. And without further ado, I want to introduce Charles Brooks. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellie. Thank you, Caden, Michaela, and Karen for the opportunity to talk to you all today. And the fact that you all are showing up in one way or another to help your community is amazing. And that's the spirit of why this is going on. It's one of the things that happened to us as a family and me as an individual was like, what can I do? I need to do something because we got to see it come back. And I'll just start off with a little background. I lived in Paradise for 15 years and raising a family there. And during the campfire, my wife was out of town working in a close by community, and got up in the morning. I'd been hiking in the canyon early morning before the fire started. Got home, was getting my kids ready for school when my son came upstairs. He said, "Dad, I smell smoke," and I didn't realize anything was going on. I didn't smell smoke. A couple minutes later, we noticed the sky was starting to turn funny colors, started listening to the police scanner and the fire scanner, and realized that something was going on in a community 8 miles away, and realized, oh, it is wildfire season. You know, they probably are going to get a handle on this thing. And then I started to hear the resource requests from the fire department, CAL FIRE, that was assigned to it, and realized that this was getting bad really quick. And 30 minutes later, I was packing a bag of clothes for myself and my wife, and then asking my kids to pack a bag of clothes and grab their favorite toy, and that we need to leave. And I just kind of say that because many of you who are on the call that may have lost a home, or have loved ones that lost a home, or experienced the trauma of the disaster. It's one of those things that there's certain things that your mind kind of always goes back to. And I just remember looking at my kids when they asked, well, what clothes do I grab, Dad? And I said, just think you're going for a sleepover. And in a matter of time, we were in the car in slow traffic, seeing fire starting to pop up in a community that we loved, and it looked the same for the 15 years that we'd lived there. And it was just such a surreal experience to go through. And then to watch from a distance as our community disappeared, it was just tough. And then I woke up the next morning far away. We ended up moving locations twice, and ended up near my father-in-law's house, about 100 miles away. And when I woke up in the morning after like 2 hours of sleep, I opened the back of the car, and back there were our 2 bags of clothes and my soccer coaching stuff. And Ellie, I'm sorry you have to hear the story again, but I think it kind of will relate to some of you, that a week before I just finished coaching my kids' soccer team and finished the soccer season. And I looked at that bag of clothes, and I basically, after swearing a couple times and getting really mad, I said, well, at least I've got stuff to coach a soccer team. And it was that moment that I just, in my brain, I said, I want to see my kids playing soccer on the field again. Like, I want to see those kids out there on a Saturday just having fun. And if they score a goal, they get to go to Dalio Donuts, and I'll buy them all donuts. Like, it has to happen. And I would, like, my heart just at that point, it was set on how can I help? How can I show up? And just like so many of you that are on this call, how can you show up and what can you do? To give you some background, I was never in disaster recovery. This was the furthest thing from my mind. Never envisioned this is where I would be. I worked for a reasonable bag manufacturer. I was a national sales manager. I traveled. I was on a plane once a week, flying all over the West Coast. Like that was my life. And then coaching kids soccer on Saturdays, and hiking and skiing, and like that was life. And I just love where we live. I love the community, and going back to work 4 days after the fire, the first time I got on an airplane, I said, absolutely not. if I wouldn't have gone to federal jail for turning a plane around, I would have turned the plane around that day. My heart was set on this is what I have to do. So that's why I'm here, and the opportunity to speak with you guys and share some of our experiences, things that have worked, things that haven't worked, and where we could have improved as a community in our recovery. Hopefully will help you guys get back to seeing that your community recovers. Disaster is different no matter where it is. Some of the things that I'll mention to you may not align with the needs of your community, but if there's something, any one little thing that you can take away from what I share with you that can help you move forward, or if you want to reach out to me by email, please do so. Going through this experience, anything that I can do to share with other communities to help you recover faster and take advantage of some of the tools that we built or the ideas and concepts to help you get there faster, that's what we're all about. So with that said, if it's okay with you, Karen, I'm just going to kind of jump into the, kind of the mobile home park discussion, because I think that's really poignant. And for our community, just in the Paradise town limits itself, which was a community of 27,000 people prior to the fire, and now we're at about 4,000 in population. The mobile home parks served as as one of the affordable housing options for our community. And Paradise was one of the communities where if you worked in Chico but couldn't afford a home in Chico, you moved to Paradise for affordable home ownership. That's how my wife and I got started. The only way we could buy our first house was to move to Paradise. And then I came up here and I went, this is like camping with a house. It's amazing. So much like the areas that you guys live in. And mobile home parks were one of those places where fixed income seniors, low income folks could actually own a home and be able to pay for a home of their own and just have their space rental, or maybe even they owned their lot within a particular mobile home park. We had some owner, resident owned manufactured home parks. And then we also had some that were just space rentals. Paradise had 28 in the town limits, and then we had 32 in the greater Paradise area. So it was a huge part of the affordable home component of the community. And I will say that they're struggling to recover. I know firsthand that there are 2 mobile home parks in our community that have been brought back online. Paradise has some unique challenges in that our entire community is on septic. And when you have mobile home parks that were developed in the 50s and 60s when septic laws weren't what they are today, that one of the biggest barriers facing mobile home parks is the ability to recover their wastewater treatment systems. And we recognized early on as a community that the mobile home parks are key to workforce housing and affordable housing, yet the challenges that the private owners of mobile home parks have faced in recovering their communities is huge. And so I would say that my first suggestion as your community, and in conversations with Karen, I've understood that you guys have similar demographics as far as income wise, and also mobile home parks are a part of your guys' community and low income and affordable housing component. And so anything that you can do as a community to support the private owners to help them get their facilities back online faster and tackle the hurdles that are going to come up if they have not come up already, whether it's right of entry with individual owners for whole park, or whether it's infrastructure like we're facing here on such a large level. You're going to be better served because the 2 parks that have come back online in our community are now starting to be occupied by tradespeople that are here helping with the rebuild. So many of the park owners are struggling with the high cost of infrastructure before they can even start to place homes for people or welcome people back. Just the hurdle of getting over infrastructure, because insurance is not what it needed to be to help with those underground, replacing a water system, replacing a wastewater treatment system, replacing the electrical grid, or individual metering to the sites. So kind of going through a list of notes I made here. Site prep. During debris removal phase, many sites are damaged or altered, requiring the whole place needs to be redesigned. Debris removal is a blunt instrument. Are you guys at debris removal yet? Have they started to I mean, it's a gut-wrenching experience on your own property, let alone seeing what's happening to your community, because they're coming in with big pieces of equipment and some of the nuances of topography are lost. And so that's something that is going to be an added cost and an added burden to the mobile home parks is how do we recreate what we had before after debris removal? You've got your infrastructure concerns, which I've already covered, but that is a huge cost. So anywhere that you guys as a community can create opportunities or create resources to help those park owners come back online to welcome people back faster is going to be a big help. Many of the mobile home parks underinsured. Make sure, and we're going to talk about collaboration and bringing people together to work on the rebuild. But this is an area where you're going to want to make sure that you have really close coordination and you foster the relationships between the utilities and the government, whether it's zoning, and you want to make sure that all those people are at the table and it's a welcoming, productive dialogue, whether a utility is not playing so nicely for one reason or another, or your local government is putting up a roadblock that the utility sees as insurmountable because of speed. Make sure the dialogue, make sure you're fostering that conversation keeps happening back and forth, and you guys are working towards solutions, because as soon as one of those big hurdles gets thrown up, then somebody uses that as the excuse of why they can't move faster to help bring that resource back online. So like, just foster those relationships and make sure that you're working through and invite people to the table, continue to invite them, let them know how important their voice is and how important it is that you have collaboration across entities and across like the utilities that are going to be a part of this. And then really pay attention to your zoning. And if you have an old general plan in your community, make sure that that is being highlighted and updated as you're building your recovery plan. Town of Paradise was gifted basically a roadmap to recovery and this community visioning process that allowed us to build a disaster recovery plan, which highlighted 42 projects of significance to the community. Everything from tier 1 projects that are infrastructure all the way through. But the general plan was part of that, but it wasn't highlighted as a major need. And now that we're in that phase of recovery where we're looking at these giant infrastructure projects, our general plan is not up to the task. It's like, I want to say 20 years old. I don't know the exact date, but the problem is now is that we're doing environmental impact reports and studies for these infrastructure projects that's based on zoning and densities that was thought of 20 years ago and not where our community is going based on this vision. So as you build your roadmap to recovery, make sure your general plan is happening at the same time. So that's where you want to make sure your local government is at the table, at your long-term recovery groups, at your community listening sessions. And you guys are making sure that, and this might be a good spot for philanthropy to jump in, is having the ability to help the municipality if their hurdle is that we don't have enough money to put staff towards the general plan update. That's where philanthropy can jump in and maybe do a match. And then you get a USDA rural grant that can come alongside that. And now you have that general plan happening at the same time. There's a huge thing that is going to hamstring our community and slow down some of these major infrastructure projects, which ties right back to the mobile home parks and the higher densities that you may need to achieve affordable housing and to be able to get people rehoused faster. There really is no way to get people out of transitional housing into safe and sustainable housing faster than typically these higher density options, at least from what we've seen over the last couple of years. And we're struggling to get those back online. You can talk to anybody down here. That is one of our biggest struggles. And when we have out of town developers that want to come up here and build houses, hey, where can we house our crews? We don't have an option. They have to pay market rate at hotels, and all that does is drive up the cost of housing. So as much effort as you can put towards prioritizing those higher density options and lowering roadblocks and seeing that happens faster will help in your recovery on a number of fronts. And I know there's a few people that I've talked to on this call that are really interested in those higher density housing options and tiny homes and options like that for affordability. But I don't think I can stress enough the importance of that. And at the end, I'm happy to answer any questions and I'm not a mobile park expert by any means, but it's something that I've been around enough through housing committee meetings and been a part of task force that are addressing mobile home parks to have a general understanding. I think, Karen, if you're okay with it, this might be a good segue into kind of the collaboration piece. Or Ellie, does that work? Kind of going into the...
Yeah, that's great. I think they dropped. They must have had some connectivity issues, but yeah, that sounds great. Thank you.
And Ellie, feel free to interrupt me at any point if you want me to speak on something else or
Great, thank you.
The next thing that I think is probably equally as important, if not more than the actual nuts and bolts of higher density housing options like mobile home parks, is the collaboration across the community and across entities and organization. I did see that someone on here is the president of the long-term recovery group. I think I saw that in the chat. I cannot stress enough the value of a long-term recovery group type entity within your community. I happen to take a board seat this year on what our long-term recovery group has evolved into, which is called the Campfire Collaborative. The traditional FEMA model of a long-term recovery group served our community very well for the first year and a half. And then it was kind of around the 1 year mark where what we call member organizations, the government entities, the nonprofits, the faith-based organizations, the community organizations that are all pouring into the long-term recovery group, started to say, hey, we're getting a little clunky and we're not addressing the needs of the community based on that structure. So how can we better foster this environmental recovery? So we went through this re-envisioning process and are now what's called the Campfire Collaborative. And we still have the same committee structure of a long-term recovery group. So you have a housing committee, you have spiritual and emotional wellness, you have unmet needs, disaster case management, those type of things. But we're really going into, instead of kind of more of the traditional hierarchy, we're now as member-driven organizations. So every member, the 120 member organizations that show up for the general meetings, they're all driving the discussion on how the Campfire Collaborative can support the work of the member organizations. So all the good stuff happens at the committee level. And that's where, like, the housing committee, for you folks who are all here to talk about housing and interested in housing, that housing committee is unbelievably important. And whether it's developed through the LTRG, a traditional VOAD, or another sponsoring organization like Rogue Valley Housing, whoever that happens to be, pulling together regular housing committee meetings are crucial. That's where you get private industry, you get government, you get philanthropy, you get the faith-based organizations that all are interested in housing solutions, and they show up and they're putting their input in and they're talking about challenges and strategies. And this is where the magic truly happens. This is where somebody raises their hand and says, I'm thinking of doing this because I want to address this need. And somebody else in the room says, hey, I'm a supplier and what you're talking about is your hurdle. That is something I can help you with. And then task forces or subcommittees are developed tackling individual single problems that they need people, like-minded people, to get together to tackle a problem. And then the beauty of the long-term recovery group, or what we're doing with the collaborative, is that committee chair or co-chairs then speaks to all the other committee chairs and says, hey, this is what we're working on. We're really struggling in this area. And somebody on another committee completely unrelated may have a resource or a solution that can affect the work that the housing committee is doing. So one of the ideas, like, who do you invite to a housing committee meeting? You guys may already know this already, but I just kind of want to recap a quick list of people that I think are vital. And I saw some of you in the chat, so that's exciting. Your FEMA volunteer agency liaison, always invite them to the housing committee meetings. You never know who your FEMA Val knows. And I will tell you that those FEMA Vals, some of them are going to be with you for 26-week deployment. Some are going to be there for a year. Some of them are incredibly resourceful and amazing human beings, absolute amazing human beings. Your state, I don't know if you guys call it OES there. That's what we call it here, Office of Emergency Services. Whoever that rep is that's assigned to housing, or maybe there might be 2 or 3, make sure they're there to hear so they can report back to the state level what's going on. Your county building department, you're going to want your local assembly member, your local senator, the staff from their office to be there. Because if you need advocacy and you need help from the state or from the federal government, you're going to want to make sure those folks are there. So your county building department, your local municipality building department. I understand that you guys have multiple municipalities all in the burn scar from your fire. Counties, individual cities or towns. You want the building department there. They're going to be able to answer the nuts and bolts questions of zoning and of code changes that are different between Talent and Phoenix. Maybe Phoenix requires one thing that Talent doesn't. Well, you're going to want those building people there to help answer those questions and guide those conversations and say, wait, hold on, pump the brakes. If you guys are thinking about this, here's what we're going to need to do on our end, or here's where we need to change on our end to make that happen. Invite your material suppliers. So if you guys have a building supply company that has multiple sites throughout, more of a regional or local player, you can invite the national chains, but typically it's the regional players who are doing the most. If you have anybody from your actual material producers, so your bigger timber companies, if they have any local offices, see if you can get one of their reps there, or other material suppliers, concrete, whoever these folks are. They may want to help, but they don't know how to be engaged. They're not looking to make that individual donation. Maybe they want to do something on a bigger scale. Like you have an expert in concrete and you guys are looking at ICF or aerated autoclave concrete housing solutions. Well, having that concrete supplier there is going to be amazing, because they may know how to get you what you need on a larger scale than just going out after an individual donation. You're going to want your builder's exchange. Some people call them a builder's exchange. There was somebody on here, and I forget what. Yeah, you might use a different term for builder's exchange, like, but they're going to be really, really important. We partner with our builders exchange on multiple projects because that's our line to the building community. That's our line to the contractors, and to understand what's going on in their world, to make sure that the projects we create and the solutions that we're coming up with actually line up with what the building capacity is in your area. Or if you need to invite additional building capacity or new building capacity, that's a perfect role for the builders exchange. Contractors. Don't overlook the contractors that want to serve. This is their community too. Yeah, they're going to be building houses. Some of them are incredibly resourceful and have input that will really help guide your housing discussions. Make sure the nonprofits are at the table, the nonprofit builders that come in, that may come into your community from around the country to help rebuild houses for the most disadvantaged. Faith-based groups. There's some faith-based groups out there doing a lot of humanitarian work and a lot of the pieces of housing. Maybe they're the ones who are going to help clear lots for you of debris and trees, or not debris removal, but brush and stuff like that. Design professionals. Invite the local architects, engineers, and professional draftspeople who know housing, who know the community. Civil engineers, real estate professionals. Invite your local real estate, what are they called? Anyway, if you have a local real estate group, make sure you're inviting the real estate community, and they're going to play a pivotal role, and they might know about that piece of land that isn't for sale that could be perfect for a housing solution that you're trying to implement, and that owner may want to sell or may be similarly aligned to you. Make sure they're in the room. And last but not least, make sure philanthropy's in the room. Your local community foundation, the Oregon Community Foundation, make sure that their reps are in the room and hearing what the needs of the community are, because they're going to be attracting the big donors that are going to want to deploy their resources in a way that's strategic and aligns with what the community needs are. So I might stop there and see if there's some questions related to kind of the community and collaboration, that type of thing. I think, is it?
Elib, did you have a question?
Yeah, I did. You mentioned some nonprofit developers that might be coming in from outside the region. I've been doing some research and really trying to identify as many of these groups as possible. And I was wondering if you had some names that you'd be able to pass on.
Sure. So in our area, we've had Hope City which their name in our local area is Volunteers Rebuilding Our Community, but it's Hope Crisis or Hope City is what they're known as. Mennonite Disaster Services is another. There are a handful of corporate partners out there that will likely reach out that could come and support a volunteer rebuild. So if you have a local or regional Habitat for Humanity, they might be augmented by a team from a corporate group that may want to come out and serve your community. And you'll start to see, as you guys are able to put together projects, you'll start to hear of groups that are interested in coming and just volunteering in the community. And those are great places to deploy them and put them to work. St. Bernard's Parish, or it used to be St. Bernard's Parish, but SBP, they were on the call last week. They have some incredible resources, and they'd be some good ones to reach out to line you guys with volunteers to come in.
Thank you.
Yep.
There was another question, Charles, in the chat. How do you make sure marginalized communities are being represented on what is being rebuilt?
Good question. That is where your community representation groups, your zone captain model, which I understand is being adopted in your community, which is unbelievably important. That is where you're going to want to make sure that those groups are encouraged to provide representation about what their needs are, and that can funnel up through their zone captain. They don't have to come out themselves. But if a particular zone is mentioning that this is our biggest need, and that zone captain can bring it forward to the housing committee that this is what we're hearing from this community, that's where your direct line into what are the needs of the community, because you're going to get into project work where you're so focused on that project that you may not pick your head up for a couple weeks to listen to the voice of the community. And that's where that relationship with the zone captains and with other community organizations, maybe there's a few churches that are continuing to provide direct assistance to people, whether it's food, showers, laundry facilities. You really want to engage in those folks. Your spiritual and emotional wellness committee, those are the ones who are really going to have a good pulse and heartbeat on the community. And I did share with, I believe it was with Karen, a report that was done by Stanford last year of engaging with the Latin American community post-disaster. And it's an incredible report on what some of the challenges and barriers are and ways to overcome that. And the zone captains is one of the things that's highlighted in there, as well as other organizations, nonprofits and charities that might work with that community, making sure you get some of that leadership involved so you're really paying attention there.
And just a note, we will send supporting documents plus a link to the recording, and anything you need, we want to provide that will help to implement these solutions.
And I see a question from Mark. As you begin the long-term recovery group development, what would you have done different or should have done better? So I came into the long-term recovery group as a member organization initially, and so I was not aware of the nuts and bolts and like how the thing was getting put together. I was there as a participating member of the housing committee. So Mark, if you send me an email, and I'll put my email in the chat here, I'll connect you with Megan Kurtz, our board chair for the Campfire Collaborative. And she was involved since day one of the formation of the long-term recovery group. And she'll be a great resource for you to ask those questions. So let me put that in there real quick. I'm one of those people that never learned to type without looking at the keyboard, so sorry. Oh, and Julie posted a link to the zone captains through Remake Talent. So check that out for sure and engage with that with Remake Talent, and make sure that they're there at every meeting, at every table, and that you're hearing that feedback from the zone captains. The other beauty of the zone captains, for those who don't know, is that once the entity is up and going, the power and the voice of all those concerns from multiple zones funneled up to the municipality, to where it's one person with a list of questions that's representing the entire community, gives that municipality the ability to answer those questions, and then that information gets disseminated back out instead of 500 people surrounding the municipality all asking questions at the same time. It's one person, one leader that's representing those 500 people asking that question. So it allows them to concentrate and focus and really work on the solutions and the concerns that are being brought forth by the zone captain. So just a little bit, a little bit of perspective there of how the buy-in happened at the local government level with that program in our area. I see that what interactions, if any, are happening with the manufactured home co-ops? Manufactured home co-ops, Bayo, would you mind kind of explaining that a little bit more to me?
Sure. Hi, this is Bayo, Casa of Oregon. I was just asking about you mentioned earlier that there were some resident-owned communities. Mm-hmm. Have there been any communication with the board or the former boards of those communities at all?
The only things that I'm aware of are more on the landowners, on the landowner side and the challenges that they're facing. But if you reach out to me by email, I'll try and dig into that a little bit for you and see what I can find out for you on the way of, what's happening with those individual boards. And I do know that our local governments are trying to engage with those landowners. But as far as the individual back and forth conversations, I'm not that into it, but I'll try and find some information for you.
Thank you.
Yep. The next thing I'll go into, this might be a good transition point, is an individual project that we developed as one of the hurdles that popped up in our community. There's a tremendous amount of underinsurance. So people were insured, but not enough for post-disaster economics. If their individual house had been lost to a fire, they probably would have had enough to rebuild. But when you look at something on the devastation of what your community faced as well as ours, material prices go up, labor prices go up, there's a labor shortage. And so if you used to be able to build a house for $170 a square foot, now you're looking at $250 a square foot. Most people were underinsured. So our organization really focused on how can we tackle some of the pre-construction hurdles that are happening in our community. And kind of going through this at the time, we realized that a good way to help is to help people with the process of designing a home and creating some opportunities for somebody who never wanted to build a custom home in their life, doesn't have the time or the energy, or really they're not in the mental space to go through the home design process, meeting with architects and engineers and thinking through all that and going through the months and months of time. They're just focused on recovery, going to work, keeping their family safe and keeping their family fed. We developed and are still working on our residential floor plan library and ADU library. What that is a web-based resource where we took the philanthropy and goodwill of the design professional community, so the architects, engineers, and professional draftspeople, and said, okay, how can we help you who wants to help individual people in a way that can help the community as a whole? And also, how can we make sure that you're comfortable in your concern about liability and give people access to plans that are going to cost them significantly less money than if they were to go out and have a custom home designed. And so we came up with this concept of a residential floor plan library. And I don't want to get too much into the nuts and bolts unless somebody wants to do a separate call on that. But we realized that we have some funding available and some partners who are interested in this concept. And so Rebuild Paradise Foundation worked with a handful of design professionals to have plans drawn that were of square footages that would affect the greatest number of population that would be underinsured or really has the greatest need, and have those plans designed that we would take them through master planning with the local municipalities to be able to offer these plans to people where with some simple changes to a site plan, this house that has had the energy calculations, the structural and everything else that needs to be done to meet the municipality's guidelines for master planning can be placed on almost any property. And Paradise is not flat. It's hills and mountains and little canyons and all sorts of stuff. So our master plans will work for about 60% of the properties in the burn scar from the campfire. And all that somebody has to do is they have to pay a percentage of what a normal plan would cost to have that same design professional create a site plan to make that house fit their unique property. And now we just released our first ADU. We have some challenges in Paradise because the minimum square footage for primary dwelling is 750 square feet. And so we designed our first ADU at that 750 square foot threshold. So somebody could build that to start with and then be able to save up to build their primary residence over time, but they could live in that because it's large enough for a primary residence by municipal code. But then when they build their primary residence, now they have an ADU that they can rent out or welcome in a family member or a friend or somebody else that they want to provide affordable housing to. So we have these plans. We have many more that are in design that range from that 750 square foot up to 1,800 square feet. We're starting to bring in our first ICF houses or insulated concrete form as a solution. We tried to work with manufactured home builders to come up with a set of standardized plans that would work across multiple companies to where they produced that one home that met the guidelines of all the communities, but none of them wanted to really buy into that idea because they're selling the individual product. They wanted their house to be unique so they could sell more of them, which is unfortunate, but the manufactured home space didn't really work for this model. But what's really neat is this ability to save money on plan design, permitting. This is something that's really cool about master planning, is that if we pay for the master planning and that initial plan review, the typical person going through for permits is going to spend about 50% of the time that a custom home would take. So you're going through plan review faster, and you're also, you're only spending about 50% of the cost on plan review because we've taken care of the bulk of it ahead of time for people. So it's a huge cost savings. The average home up here, people are saving between $5,000 and $10,000 by utilizing a master plan. And so that $5,000 or $10,000 now is money that they can put directly towards their build and towards materials and the higher cost of construction. Plus, we have designed other programs like grants programs and some mapping services that we provide to also tackle some of those other pre-construction costs so that people can put the majority of their money into their actual rebuilds. And that's the way that we see for our unique community as being one of the greatest ways to help. And in developing something like the residential floor plan library, this was something that was an idea 3 months after the fire, but we didn't have our first plan, master planned, until a year and a half after the fire. It took a long time of working with the design professionals and the municipalities to get to a set of criteria that everybody was comfortable with. Design professionals from a liability perspective, because it's their name and their design on every one of these homes, to making sure that we were achieving the highest common denominator across municipalities. So Town of Paradise for foundations was here, Butte County was here, but Butte County was up here for energy and geotechnical. And we had to make sure that when we put out the RFP to the design professionals, it was to the maximum criteria that we would need. But now they know how to work with this, and they're developing plans that meet that criteria, and it works anywhere. And it's really a neat process. And this board over my shoulder right here is our tracking of our master plan library. And so we just had one approved yesterday. So I was able to change the board and move that one up. And it's a huge win for our community. One of the things you don't think about is we had a master plan of a garage. A lot of people can only afford to build a house right now. They don't have enough money to pay for that garage too. So, well, here's a garage master plan that 2 years after you're in your home, maybe now you can afford to build that garage. So that's going to be a little bit of a help. And plan ownership is a huge thing, at least here in California. And with our design professionals, it was so important to understand who's going to still own these. All our design professionals, they still own the plans. That was critical to them because it is their name and their stamp that's on that set of documents and will be over and over again. So they want to make sure that they're the ones who have the last touch on that site plan. So it isn't just design this house, put it out on the internet, and anybody can go and build it. That's where the real challenge lied with the design professional and how we were able to get their buy-in. There's a lot of other little nuances there. We do a tremendous amount of case management with people. Our original idea was, hey, we're going to put out this plan library. People click a button, they get connected to the design professional, everybody's happy. Well, it didn't work out quite that well. And I guess I was overly optimistic, but now we're realizing that the best way for the design professionals to have a good experience and stay engaged, and for the end users to have the best experience, is to create another layer in there. And that is where when people click that they're interested in the plans or they're ready to get started, one of us from our organization makes a phone call and has a conversation with people. Where are you at? What questions can we answer? And then let's talk about how the process is going to go, next steps. We developed some flyers that go along with the first email that we send that connects them with the design professional of some homework. You got to get people's head in the game. When people are going to rebuild, construction is difficult. It's hard for anybody if you're not trying to recover. There's so many hoops that have to be jumped through. And if you can get people's mind kind of engaged, give them a little bit of homework, you need to talk to the municipality, find out these couple questions before you meet with your design professional. That's going to get people's head in the game and get them start to think in the terms of the rebuild. And it's a lot of simple stuff, but it saves time for the design professional, and people are a little bit more prepared when they come to the table. And this is all feedback that we've received by having a really open dialogue with our design professional partners, with the people that are accessing the resources and saying, how can we improve this? How can we make it a better experience? And that's really where the program is starting to shine for us, is this constant reinventing and improving, not just put something out there and say that's enough and let's work with what we got. It's consistent improvement because it is such a value. And I'm very proud to say that as of yesterday, we've connected over 50 people with master plans. And we have almost 30 people that are either have pulled permits and are under construction or in plan review with those master plans. That may not sound like a lot, but for our community, that is 50 people that could be saving $10,000 a piece. And that's a big number to me. And my whole goal was is if I could help one neighbor or one community member come back that was unsure beforehand, then that was a win in my book. So this is 50 wins. I'm super excited. And now that we're getting rolling and we got the building season upon us, I'm hoping next year that number is 200. And so that's the basics of the floor plan library. If there's anybody here that wants to talk in a lot of detail about that, happy to set up a separate call to just talk about floor plan library. And other than that, that's all I got. I'm open to questions. Thank you so much for listening and having me, and it's who we are, what we're doing.
Thank you, Charles. So I'm going to inject a couple notes here, and then we're going to open it up to Q&A. So we'll have over half an hour of questions for Charles. As I said before, if we have your email address, we will be sending you the notes that we've been taking on this call, a link to the recording of the call, and a link to register for future events, as well as some supporting documents that were mentioned on the call. Our upcoming event on Tiny House Villages is going to take place on February 16th at 11 a.m. Again, another Tuesday. That's with Dan Bryant of Square One Villages. I will pass it to Karen to tell us a little bit more about that.
Yes, Square One Villages has been innovating tiny house villages. They started with shelter tiny house villages for homeless. They've gone on to co-ops now with Cottage Village in Eugene. Actually, I think it's in Springfield. And they have a lot to say about how you can create community land trusts and in combination with co-ops and create a village with that. So we're really excited to have Dan again, because he's moved his, since the last time I promoted Dan here in the community, which was a couple of years ago, he's moved his nonprofit to do some incredible work with more developments.